So welcome back. I will start out by talking about archiving and compressing data. And I still share my screen. Yes, good. So first we'll cover some compressing and decompressing files and directories, and we will focus on gzip, to a lesser degree zip, and then on tar. And you have already seen tarballs. You have seen the exercises tarball we have had for this course. So how do I compress and decompress files and directories under Linux? And how do I create an archive or a tarball? So we'll learn to compress and decompress files and directories mainly with gzip, and learn to archive or create a tarball with tar. To compress and decompress, gzip is the standard compression program under Linux. There is also zip, and there's a bzip too. Bzip 2 compresses better, but takes quite a lot longer. You can use it to compress very large image files. For instance, we used it when I studied astrophysics. Then we used it for zipping the image files that we took there. It takes longer, but it is quite good compression. There's also zip, the regular zip that you probably know. So gzip, compression utility that is designed as a replacement for a program that was called compress that existed quite long ago. It still exists though, I think. It has much better compression, and it has no patented algorithms, which is always important. And it's the standard compression system for all GNU software. And it's a recommended compression system. There are some options. -D is decompress instead of compress. There is a shortcut which is g unzip. -R is recursively compress or decompress directories and their contents. -K, keep the original files after compression. And -V is a display verbose output, where it also shows things like compression ratio. So if you want to code along, then the files and folders in the directory exercises and arch. So we are going to go up one and then down into arch. And I'm going to use what I have here to illustrate much of this here. So to compress a file and also remove the uncompressed file, I would do gzip and, for instance, a file.txt. So what I have here are these files here. And so I'm going to gzip a file. And now it looks like this. It was compressed from 229 bytes to 180. And it also removed the original file because I didn't ask to keep it. And then I could, well, you can see a file.txt, it's no longer there. So if I want to decompress it, then I would use either gzip -d and this a file text gz, or g unzip a file text.gz. I am almost always using g unzip because it's easier than, well, I feel it's easier to do that. So you can do what you want. Either works. So you can see now you again have your file from before. It has the same size, and it removed the compressed version. So what if you wanted to keep it? You can do that by -K. So then we do gzip -k and the same file again. So see, now you have both. What happens then if you want to unzip it again? Let's try and do that. See what happens. We could now again also keep a file text gset, but I'm not going to do that. Then of course it asks you, do you want to overwrite? And that's nice. So you get the option. What happens if we say no? Then it just exits and say I'm not overwriting it, but it's then not also doing anything. Otherwise, you could just overwrite it, or you could rename the original file or something. So what if you want to compress all the files in the directory recursively? Let's see what we have in dir2. We have 3 files and 1 directory. We'll just do like this, so it's maybe easier to see. I would like to recursively compress all the files in dir2 directory. So what I do is I say gzip, I say -r, and then dir2. So let's now see what it is in dir2. It has now compressed each of the files. And also those inside of the subdirectory. And g unzip -r, dir2 would unzip all of it again. So one thing you may have noticed is it did not also archive all the files that you had inside of the directory into one file, like a zip would have done. It only compresses them. So we are back to what we had before. So if you want to also archive the files, then you would use tar. And it's very common to use tar and gzip together. And we'll talk about that in a very short time. So I mentioned before there's bzip or bzip2. And if you want to try that out, then that is also installed on, I would assume, almost all Linux systems. So you can try and compress and uncompress with that also if you want to. Then there's zip. Zip is simple compression and file packaging utility, so it does both compression and archiving. There's a maximum size limit of zip files at 4 GB. If you exceed it, there are risk of corruption. So you don't want to do that, I guess, and gzip is better. And if you want to, and you have many smaller files, or in general, then you could use zip. To use zip, then you give zip and then what you want to name the compressed and archived file, and then the files or directories that you want to zip. And you can do it like this, and it will tell you how much is deflated. You could also compare it to gzip. As you saw at the beginning, it's possible to add -v to get verbose output, in which case you are told how much it has compressed. And you could try and compare gzip and zip to see which one that compresses best. To uncompress, you use unzip on the archived and compressed file. and it will ask you if you want to replace or rename. You can also compress all files in one directory to a single archive file, and that behaves as you would expect. So it simply zips down everything and puts it into an archive. And you can also, and you could do that also with gzip, just take specific types of files. Maybe you only want your C files. Okay, so now we know that gzip is a recommended utility to compress files, and we also know that it only does compression, it doesn't do archiving. So what do I do if I want to archive? You use tar. And this program saves many files together into a single archive file. And what it does is actually concatenating them. And it will also restore individual files from the archive. You can automatically compress and decompress when you do so, because it works well together with, for instance, gzip. But it is its own separate utility. And tar --help will give the formats that defaults to GNU. And that's only generally important if you have files larger than 8 GB. Now, tar, what is that? Well, it is short for tape archive. And that's because it was originally developed for magnetic tape storage, for reading and writing data for a sequential I/O device that didn't have a file system originally. So it's something like this. A tar ball is a commonly used name to refer to an archive file in the tar or tape archive format. And tar balls can be compressed with gzip, bzip2, and other things. And there are options or flags to do that automatically. So the syntax is tar, the options, there are some basic options here, the name you want to give your tar archive, and then the files or directories you want to add to it. -C creates a new archive. -A autocompresses. And it will guess from the ending you give the archive what it is you want to compress with. You can also use -R to append files to the end of the archive, and -X to extract files, and -F for specifying the file, the archive's name. -T is a list of files and folders in the archive, and -V is verbose. It shows a list of the files as it processes them and puts them into the archive. I read somewhere that a tarball, you can also sort of see it as a ball of tar that is rolling around in your files and gathering all of them up into a clump or something like this. So someone thought of it like this. So I guess that might be a way of remembering it. So here are some examples, and code along if you would like to. So let's try and generate a tarball. And to do so, I will go up 1 to the main directory or the parent directory of all these subdirectories I have here, in the exercises directory. And then I'm going to create a tarball with everything in Arch. So let's say tar -C, create a new archive. I want it to be verbose because I want to see what's happening. And now I want to give it a name. I'm calling it arch.tar. And then I will say what it is I want to archive. That is Arch. And so it takes all of this here and puts it into an archive. And we can see what happened here. So you still have the directory you archived, and you have the tarball that is the archive of the directory. If you want to extract the files, you do tar minus X for extract, V if you want it to be verbose, and F that you're now giving the file name that you want to extract, arch.tar. Do note, if there's a directory in the same name with the directory you do it, it overwrites and it doesn't ask or anything, it will just do it. So if you want to generate a tarball and compress it with gzip, then you do like you did before, but you add -z for compression. So let's say tar -set, create, verbose, this file, we call it arch tar, and we give it the gset ending to say that it's a gzipped. And then we do that with arch. And let's see what happened. We now have our gzipped tarball here, and it's quite a bit smaller. And if you uncompress and extract the files from a tarball, again, you do it just like before, except you now add a set. X extracts, V if you want it verbose to see the files, F what the file name will be, arch tar gset. Again, it overwrites, it doesn't ask. In general, Linux likes to have one tool that does one thing but does it well, and that's why it has two tools to do the compression and the archiving, because they are considered two separate things that you may not always want to do together. So let's